Hans here again. Only a few minutes to go.
We're looking at the brink of a quantum materials revolution.
It's about what science can do and what society can become.
Falling walls. What a great image.
Good afternoon. Please let me welcome you all to the first ever Falling Walls Lab in New South Wales, open to residents in New South Wales, ACT and Tasmania. I'm Professor Hans Bachor, Secretary for Education and Public Awareness of Science at the Australian Academy of Science. I will be the MC for you this afternoon. First, please let me acknowledge the traditional owners and elders past and present on the lands that we are meeting today. As we all know, many events and meetings had to move online due to the global pandemic, in particular in Sydney now with the lockdown. So thank you all for joining us today, wherever you are, in this new and challenging format. It is exciting for me to be here as your MC for Falling Walls, Lab New South Wales, and to see so many young researchers ready to share their most impressive work. In this competition, each presenter has just 3 minutes to make their case, to explain the wall that they wish to break down. Now, we are most grateful to the panel of renowned judges who will select the 2 winners of today's competition. And let me introduce the jury members. Professor Hugh Jones-White, Jury Chair, New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, Commissioner for the Natural Resources Commission, New South Wales Government. Mr. Jason Collins, Chief Executive Officer, European Australian Business Council. Professor Martina Möllering, Executive Dean, Faculty of Arts, Macquarie University. Professor Veena Shalvala, ARC Sienta Professor, Director of the Center for Sustainable Materials with Research and Technology, or known as SMART, at the University of New South Wales. Mr. Nishant Shandilya, Regional Coordinator for Euraccess, Australia and New Zealand. And finally, but not least, Katharina McGrath, Director, DRD Information Centre in Sydney. Thank you all for joining us as the jury. Now, Falling Wall Labs brings together young scientists, engineers, professionals from across the globe to present their vision on how to make the world an even better place. Please let me introduce now the presenters here at New South Wales Lab New South Wales. We have Breaking the Wall of Self-Driving Car Safety by Morteza Saberi, University of Technology, Sydney. Breaking the Wall of Searching for a Silent Killer, Nafiseh Mirabdolhosseini from the Western Sydney University. Breaking the Wall of Alien Fish Invasion via Trojan War, Lokman Norazmi, Lokman Norazmi from the Institute of Marine and Antarctic Studies, University of Tasmania. We have Breaking the Wall of Urban Heat in the Western Sydney, Mahmuda Sharmin from Western Sydney University. Breaking the Wall of 100% Transition to Renewable Energies by Mohammadreza Sedighi from Southern Cross University. We will see Breaking the Wall of Stem Cell Therapies for Osteoarthritis, presented by Jiao Li, University of Technology, Sydney. Breaking the Wall of Single Chip Microscopy, Michael Rupert, University of Newcastle. Breaking the Wall of Unsustainable Healthcare, Elizabeth Austin, Australian Institute of Health Innovation, Macquarie University. Breaking the Wall of Microscopy, Nata Franco Suarez de Bem, University of Newcastle. And then Breaking the Wall of Well-Being Research, Olga Lucia Gamboa Arana, University of Sydney. We are all looking forward to your presentation. Each presenter will have 3 minutes to pitch their project, followed by questions or comments from the jury to the presenter. Our first and second place winners will be decided by the jury and announced at the end of the event today. There will also be a People Choice winner today, and you can vote for it. Our live stream audience is encouraged to vote for this winner. Following all 10 presentations, the voting will be open. The link for the vote will be in the comment section of this live stream in either YouTube or Facebook. And I think we can now also see the RFC code for the voting. And I think we had before the Twitter hashtags. So please take part in the vote. So let's start. Please welcome our first presenter, Morteza Saberi, University of Technology, Sydney.
Like many of us, I have always loved cars. When I turned 16, I lost my cousin in a car accident. Yeah, like this. But ever since then, I have kept thinking to do something to save many other people's lives. You know, human error is the main reason for the car accidents, and that's why self-driving cars were developed. But still, they are not 100% safe. You may ask why. Just assume two scenarios. First one, a sunny day in the middle of the city. Good object recognition leads to the good decision by AI. Now, a dark and rainy evening, a self-driving car winding its way down a narrow country road. Suddenly one obstacle is appearing. What is that obstacle? What the car should do? It should gather the information about the size, shape, and position of that obstacle, sending to the AI algorithm for the evaluation. But you can assume some potential errors, mistaking a pedestrian for a slow driving car and overtaking it. Such an error could lead to the road fatality. This simple example shows perfect vision of self-driving car are very important. And this is the issue that our team at UT is working hard to address it. As an AI expert, I'm here to tell you something. Imperfect vision of self-driving car cannot just be blamed because of the complex AI algorithm. Bad data is responsible too. So, how we can take care of the bad data? First, we should make the AI model transparent so that safety experts can understand them good. To that end, we developed a tools which examine the responses of AI models under challenging road conditions and provides the information to the safety experts on how to repair the model faults. I hope this helps break the wall of the self-driving car safety with one ultimate goal: a world without car accident. Thank you.
Thank you, Morteza. Now we have the floor for questions. Please welcome Hugh to ask the question.
Morteza, this is also a very big interest area of mine. How do you measure how well your algorithms perform? And will we ever be in a position to guarantee that self-driving cars will not hurt people?
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, as you know, we are in era of the human AI interaction. And in my algorithm, my aim is to make the AI more transparent. That's why the issues of unknown, we can address it. But as you mentioned, still I believe that we are a bit far from this aim. But by having the human in the loop, by showing them what's happening with the AI, why AI is good in which occasion, and why AI cannot deliver its promises. So the metric which actually we use is based on the human and crowdsourcing techniques. And that's why we hope to get, better outcome, which we got it. But still, I mean, the second question is an important question. And the issue is not just, bad data or complex AI. We have other issues. If we lost the internet, or if we lost, sometimes map or other tricky situation. But I believe that this line open how we can bring the human in the loop. And by the human, sometimes we need AI experts, sometimes we need safety expert, and the collaborative way, I hope that it helps us to have a bright future on this important research direction.
Good. So I will say that I worked in self-driving vehicles, but I didn't get my driving license until I was 55.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Morteza. So please welcome our second presenter, Nafiseh Mirabdolhosseini from Western Sydney University.
Hi, I am Nafiseh, a biomedical engineer, and I am developing a new medical device. This is the fact that early diagnosis of esophageal cancer saves lives. Within the last 3 decades, the incidence of esophageal cancer have risen rapidly by over 300%, whereas 5-year survival rate is only 22%. This cancer grows silently and is usually diagnosed in a later stage. Despite the need for early diagnosing of this cancer, up to date, there is no practical screening tools available. My project aims to develop a translational solution to address this problem. This means I'm looking for a system that not only is able to serve as a screening tool, but also would be adopted by clinical settings. For achieving this, I had interviewed with the main stakeholders, patients, and clinicians to find out the key challenges and opportunities. As a result, I found that the endoscopy system is the gold standard tool for diagnosing esophageal cancer. It is applied by specialists and required hospital resources. However, a high-risk patient usually refers late to the specialist and having endoscopy done because esophageal cancer symptoms are non-specific and they are similar to those experiencing reflux diseases. Considering these, we decided to bring the endoscopy system to the general practitioner's office, where endoscopy could be part of an annual health checkup and suspected individuals are referred for early diagnosis. We designed and developed a minimally invasive optical system considering patient comfort. This system would be adopted well by general practitioner. Its procedure only takes 10 minutes to perform and does not require cleaning afterward, since it has a single-use catheter. Also, the system contains automated software to find any abnormalities where there is no need for time-consuming data interpretation. With the help of my team, the future of esophageal cancer screening will be as simple as a visit to the general practitioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Nafiseh. Please welcome Katerina to ask the question.
Thank you very much, Nafiseh, for your great presentation and your great idea in breaking the wall of esophagus cancer. After personally also losing close family members to cancer in the recent years, I'm wondering how your device actually influences the 5-year survival rate of esophageal cancer patients. So the early detection, you said that 23%, I think, only survive the 5-year survival rate because it's detected quite late. How would your device improve that rate? What's your estimation?
Hi, thank you for your question. Actually, because usually this cancer is diagnosing in the latest stage because there is no specific symptoms for that. We are hoping by having my device in a general practitioner's office, so every time a patient has symptoms or they are in a high risk, so they can use my device and see if there is any abnormalities, they can refer to the endoscopy and have biopsy earlier before cancer is very in an advanced stage. So treatment would be easier and even surgery can be more successful than the latest stage.
Okay, if I might ask another question, at which stage of the development are you currently with your device?
Yes, we made the first prototype and we tried it on a patient, on a volunteer, and now we are trying it on more patients than volunteers to see how the device is working. And after that, hopefully we will go for the software, to making a software.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And good luck for the future.
Thanks.
Thank you, Katharina and Nafiseh. Please welcome our third presenter, Lokman Norazmi, from the Institute of Marine and Antarctic Studies, University of Tasmania.
Invasion of alien species is the #1 threat for Australia's unique biodiversity, causing an economic loss estimated at $13.6 billion, and that was 10 years ago. One of the alien culprits is Gambusia holbrooki, aka the eastern mosquito fish, which aggressively invading our freshwater ecosystem. This species is listed as the top 8 worst aquatic species globally, and they are threatening more than 30 native frogs, fishes, and even aquatic birds, including endangered species such as the green and golden bell frog. They are bullies in the aquatic ecosystem where they compete for food, they interfere with reproduction, and attack fish and tadpoles, causing population depletion of these native species. Now, physical and chemical solutions to eradicate these alien pests have been unsuccessful and, to a certain extent, have negative impact on native species. For example, if we use poison, yes, we might kill Gambusia, but also accidentally kill other native species. Therefore, a genetic solution centered on Trojan chromosome carriers was identified as the most feasible strategy to combat these pests at continental scale. Now, this is the first time this concept or strategy is being tried in Australia. There are other genetic approaches, but they are exploratory compared to this approach. The theory here is to produce and release physically female fish with male genetic, produced via hormone sex reversal into the wild. They will then breed with normal males, which will then lead to a male biased population. And when there's too many males, the population will decline and collapse, thus eradicating this pest species specifically without harming native species. Now, this approach will complement other genetic approaches that might be developed later as the technology advances, and it can also be applied to other alien pest fish, such as carps. Currently, I have overcome significant walls or barriers to implement this war strategy, which includes understanding its basic biology, development of Trojan females, and assessment of its reproductive fitness. We are now ready to enter the next phase, upscaling to pond trials. Though it might still need a bit of time, but it is clear that we are on the right path to win this war.
Thank you, Lokman. Please let me welcome Vina to ask a question.
Thanks, Hans. Lokman, very interesting presentation. I'm really curious to know, and it's nice to hear you're going now into pond trials. How are you going to actually know when you're measuring your data, regular monitoring of your data that gives you an indication what kind of success factors you're going to be monitoring over a period of time? Because when you're getting into that trial mode, you need to be keeping track of your data so you can see the progress that your solution is actually making.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So basically, when we go for pond trials, the first thing that we want to see, and we want to monitor is first to see the sex ratio of the fish, whether they manage to breed with the normal females, with the normal males. And then throughout the pond trials, we are going to look whether we have managed to skew the sex ratio of the fish population in the pond trials. And from there, we will really know that this strategy is working. Basically, we have tried it in the lab, in aquariums, in tanks, and we can see that we are producing all this male population. So yeah.
So what's that sort of comparison in terms of the length of the trial that you want to do versus what you've done in the labs?
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
The trial period,
yeah.
Have you kind of thought about that compared to what you might do in a lab environment or an aquarium versus pond trials? What's the time period?
Because these fish is actually, they have a short life cycle. So we are looking at around 6 months or a year of pond trials to see the effect. Because basically our team also have developed a model to see how long that we might need to restock the fish in the wild. So in the wild, we expect about 5 to 8 years. And for the pond trials, we hope between 6 months to 1 year, just to see the effect and to see whether our modeling work is correct in terms of how many fish that we need to restock. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Lokman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lokman, and thank you, Rina. Please welcome our fourth presenter, Mahmuda Sharmin from Western Sydney University.
Breaking the wall of urban heat in Western Sydney. Globally, temperature anomalies are breaking records every year. In cities, surface temperatures are at least a couple of degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding non-urban areas. 68% of the global population will be living in urban areas by 2050. Like in other parts of the world, the population of Greater Sydney is increasing. To accommodate them, Western Sydney will have over 1 million new houses. What fantastic news, but is it? Today, I'm going to give you a fuller picture of the new housing areas using the experience of a resident. In 2018, Mala bought a house in a new suburb of Western Sydney. The entire suburb looked so clean and our house looked so smart. Soon though, Miss Mala realized her house was not as smart as she had first thought. To keep cool during the austral summer, Mala had to use aircon 24 hours, which increased her energy cost. So why do you think Mala's house was not as smart as she had first thought? I think Mala's issue of urban heat was in her suburb. This is where my project fits. I measure air temperature in 3 pairs of new and old residential areas in Western Sydney to understand the housing density and the level of vegetation in the area affects the local heat balance. On each occasion, the new suburbs with little vegetation exceeds the thermal stress level of the old areas throughout the day. New residential areas experienced a sharp rise of 2 to 5 degrees Celsius in air temperature than old areas. The old areas that had abundant trees and a far lower proportion of man-made surfaces were able to maintain less unfavorable conditions. My research helps by pointing out that to make our cities compatible with future challenging climatic conditions, we need to balance green space with built infrastructure within urban planning to cool down Western Sydney and to make a more livable place to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahmuda. Please welcome Nishant to ask the question.
Hi, Mahmuda. Nice presentation. Lots of people will be looking forward to your study and the results. My question is rather simple. There are several studies on the effect of tree plantation design to tree crown geometry and even extended to different pavements or ground surface covers on urban heat, right? So how is your approach different than ongoing activities being conducted in this sphere?
Right. Thank you very much for your question, Nishan. I know even several chapters of my question are dealing this kind of questions, like choosing the best tree species for urban environment. But as you know, in Western Sydney, especially in Greater Sydney, now these kind of new housing areas, which was the right side picture of my second slide, was quite dense. And if you go there, you'll feel like, oh my God, it's just so monotonous. There is no tree cover. All the walls are black, roads are black, and it's very new for me. I never saw any like such kind of housing area. They're just ramping up this kind of housing area in last few years, maybe in last decade, to accommodate all this population coming in Sydney area, because they are not building any house in the LGS in Sydney. They are more moving to the Western Sydney. It's okay to build houses in Western Sydney, but the approach is quite frustrating, because you can talk to the residents and you'll understand that it's not healthy, it's not sustainable. And in Australia, especially not last year, but year before, and in 18-19, we received 3 to 4 heat waves, and the temperature was 47, 48 degrees Celsius. And you can't believe living in this suburb in that condition. So it's actually directly related to human health, and you can't actually develop a sustainable cities in such kind of environment. So what message I'm trying to produce is that this is not a acceptable residential area design. We need to find a better way. We can actually local LGS are now evaluating few other options, like build multiple storied of building and spare some space for green space, and somehow build shared garage, so then all the residents can use space efficiently, and at the same time leave some space for greens, which is very important, especially in Sydney, where like we used to have 3 to 4 heat waves and temperature is already high. So yeah, that's my message.
Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mahmuda and Nishant. So please welcome our 5th presenter, Mohammadreza Sedighi, Southern Cross University.
Catastrophic flood, bushfire, sea level rise, drought. A single term can describe all these apocalyptic phenomena, climate change. We need an urgent reduction in the energy-related emission by making a complete transition to a low-carbon energy future. But some form of energy demands are hard to electrify, such as high-temperature industries. Good news is that the concentrated solar thermal technologies can help these sectors transition to renewable energy while also providing a dispatchable electricity generation. But they need to evolve to operate at higher temperature, above 700 Celsius, to unlock advanced higher efficiency thermodynamic cycles. New high-temperature solar thermal receiver represent the key for this evolution, because the receiver governs the rest of plant's operation temperature. At present, however, commercial solar receivers have been limited to temperature below 600 Celsius because of, first, a classic trade-off between temperature and efficiency due to the poor solar volumetric absorption in the conventional opaque receiver design. Second, the conventional heat transfer fluids such as molten salt are not stable above 600 Celsius. To address both these issues, my PhD thesis proposes an air receiver that uses a semi-transparent absorber enabling solar rays absorption, which enhances efficiency at high temperature. And air as a heat transfer fluid is stable within a wide temperature range. Let's make it simple. For my marbles, here they are. I'm sure we all have played with them in our childhood. An amazing, simple, safe, and low-cost game. Now I'm playing another game with them. I'm using a pack of them to make a semi-transparent absorbing medium. A single transparent bulb lets rays transmit throughout, while thousands of them absorb them volumetrically and more uniformly than a classic opaque one. Our result demonstrated that simple novel design can meet the target temperature at high efficiency of 90% with a third of conventional receivers' cost. This represents a new promising pathway towards high temperature inexpensive receiver to break the wall of the complete transition to renewable energy. To save the planet, who knows, Marvel might need marvels.
Thank you, Mohammadreza. And please let me ask Veena again to ask a question.
Thanks, Hans. Mohammadreza, very interesting concept to start to, I guess, build some alternatives for providing these kinds of solutions and getting past that barrier of temperature. Have you looked at basically the stability of the kinds of materials that you're going to put into this? Because, of course, now you're getting into a whole new realm of operations. So whether this performance is actually going to remain at the level that you have indicated over an extended period of time? Mohammadreza, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much for the great question, Bino. Yes, so we are using the quartz sphere, so its maximum service temperature is above 1000 Celsius. So it do tolerate the temperature range that we are working on. But our study was on the laboratory scale. So we used a solar simulator and for our prototype. So it was under a steady state condition. But for an on-sun test that we need to do that in the future. So because we have some fluctuations there, definitely. And so that one can actually might affect the mechanical performance of our quartz that need to tolerate. So it's something that we need to explore further.
And have you also looked at, I know you've talked about it as quartz, but there must be differences in the quality of the material, what kind of quality you expect this material to have so that you can get the best possible performance?
If I get your question correctly, the quality about, for example, the optical quality, if you mean, yes. So actually, the things that what we are going to address is that in the conventional design, because the absorber or the opaque absorber, so the external surfaces absorb the heat. So that is why we have a hot region. So a huge amount of the energy radiate to the ambient. But with having this semi-transparent absorber, the rays can penetrate and then trap in the inner volume of our absorber and then absorb there. So, and because we are using a pack bed, so it's a simple design. So we can just change the morphology of our design. So for the front layers, we use the transparent spheres, and then we just decrease the transparency. And for the rear layers, we use for example, black painted spheres. So with this, with this changing in the optical properties of our design, we can have our desirable solar radiative flux throughout our absorber.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mohammadreza.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veena. Thank you, Mohammadreza. Please welcome now our sixth presenter, Jiao Li, from the University of Technology.
Imagine that you're making a magic soup to feed little magical creatures so they can produce a magic potion for curing a dreadful disease. I'm doing this with stem cells, magical creatures which, when grown in the right environment, can produce these tiny particles full of beneficial factors to act as a cure for dreadful diseases such as osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis gives you agonizing pain in the joints, from hips and knees to hands and ankles, preventing you from doing simple things like walking around or even just getting out of bed. Because of this reduced mobility, patients are twice as likely to die from concurrent diseases like cardiovascular disease or diabetes. The bad news is that osteoarthritis has no cure. The doctor will give you drugs or ask you to do some exercises to make your joints less painful, but this does not stop the progression of disease. Ultimately, you can choose to have your joint removed to stop the pain and replace it with an artificial implant. However, this is not an option for older patients who cannot tolerate the risks of surgery, and for younger patients, the surgery can have many complications like infection, and the implant only lasts a limited number of years. So what can we do? The good news is that we're working towards a cure for osteoarthritis by developing new ways to reduce inflammation and induce self-repair in joints. I'm working on a solution using stem cells, cells that have the ability to repair damage. These stem cells can be sourced from the adult human body, like the bone marrow or fat, and have a remarkable ability to respond to the environment they live in. Through a pioneering approach at the interface of engineering and biology, I use computational methods to discover the best environment for growing stem cells. In response, they produce these tiny nanoscale biological particles called extracellular vesicles containing the most effective bioactive molecules for treating osteoarthritis. Once purified, these vesicles can be injected into the joint as a magic potion to stop the pain and also disease progression. This research could result in a therapy that brings life-changing benefits to hundreds of millions of patients globally and reduce an enormous burden on our healthcare systems. And guess what? We can adapt the same workflow to develop new stem cell-based therapeutics for treating other diseases as well. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Jiao. Now please welcome Jason to ask the question.
Thanks very much, Jaja, for your presentation and certainly some exciting possibilities there through your work. The question I wanted to ask is that whilst in many ways we think of this as being very new technology, there has been some use of stem cells in terms of treatment with limited, to the best that I can see, effectiveness. So my question is what is the new element to your research in terms of the possibilities that it opens up, given so much work has been done already to date in this area?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question, Jason, a very relevant question. So there are actually, obviously in this particular field of osteoarthritis I'm working in, there have been people who have trialed stem cell therapies, and so far people have gotten inconsistent results even just within this field. And there are two main reasons for this based on my preliminary findings in the laboratory. And one of these is that because these stem cells actually have this miraculous ability to respond to the environment, and that's why they're being used extensively in tissue engineering and regenerative medicine, when you put them into a disease environment such as an osteoarthritic joint, in the long term, they will actually tend to respond to this disease environment and start expressing some of the characteristics of the disease cells as well, which probably is one of the factors leading to the fact that they are not producing their beneficial effects in the long term as cells. And this can be probably said for many other diseases where they have been applied as well. So the novelty of my approach is that we are taking the secreted products of these stem cells instead of the cells themselves, which will not respond to the disease environment. And because we can use this machine learning platform, which is a computational method, to optimize the growth environment of these stem cells, we can actually make them produce beneficial factors that are specifically targeted towards a particular disease, in this case, osteoarthritis. And this approach, this systematic approach of optimizing the environment and getting them to produce optimal particles has never been done in the literature for osteoarthritis. And the systematic approach of using machine learning has never been done for stem cell-derived extracellular vesicles for any other disease. So very exciting parts ahead.
Excellent. Thank you for your response. Good luck.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jiao. Now let's please welcome our seventh presenter, Michael Ruppert, University of Newcastle.
If you think of a microscope, the image of an instrument comes to mind where you can look through some lenses to directly see a magnified version of an object. Now what you really see though is the reflected light from that object. And so what if it's much smaller than the wavelength of light itself? Well, long story short, you won't be able to see it. Now if I told you that there is still a microscope out there that can image molecules and even atoms, which are much, much smaller than the wavelength of visible light, you would be hopefully a little bit intrigued. If I told you then that this microscope does this by mechanically touching the surface of a sample you would hopefully be at the edge of your seat. I want to develop the next generation of these microscopes, cheaper and more flexible, by shrinking the entire system down to the single chip level. But first, how does this microscope actually work? Well, imagine you're trying to find your way around in the dark. It appears like a good idea to use some sort of stick and tap it around in front of you. And if it hits an object, that information is passed into your hand. Now let's take that stick and shrink it to the point where it's only as long as your hair is wide. Now, by tapping this tiny beam over the surface of a sample, the minuscule height variations of nanometer scale objects can be measured through the vibrations of this beam. This allows to reconstruct a 3D image of the surface and its properties entirely without light. Now, unfortunately, the current technology has its price. These instruments are rather bulky and big, not really portable or flexible, and they're very, very expensive. Therefore, my research works towards shrinking various components of the microscope down to the chip level. Most importantly, the heart of the microscope is implemented on a single silicon chip, and all the actuation and sensing is done via smart materials using piezoelectric thin films and piezoresistive regions. This approach has the potential to not only reduce the cost by a factor of 100 or more, it also shrinks the size of the microscope from the lab bench down into the palm of my hand.
Thank you, Michael. Please let me ask Hugh again to ask the question.
So, Michael, I'm really interested in that because I spend a lot of my time funding universities to buy lots of expensive microscopes. So if you can do them cheaper, much better. I have to ask, there's usually a payoff when you reduce size, usually a reduction in sensitivity or a number of other things. And I guess also, you know, part of the larger microscopes is actually maintaining the sample in a stable way and a stable temperature. How are you managing that part of the process?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So basically you're referring to the fact that when you shrink something down to a smaller mass, then the influence of the temperature and the surrounding medium will affect its vibrations, because the thermal noise will actually affect it more. So that's exactly correct. At the moment, we're battling with these two things. So one of them is you still have to have a very accurate environment if you want to go down to the highest possible resolution. But sometimes that's not necessary. You know, I'll get back to that. The other problem is basically that at the moment we're using electronic ways of sensing through mechanical changes of the actual microsystem. At the moment, they still have slightly higher noise flows than optical methods, but we are right now at the point where they become comparable at a footprint reduction of 100 or 1,000 or more, and price reduction. So these are two benefits that outweigh it. And then getting back to the fact that sometimes you don't actually need to get into the super high resolution. So for instance, for biological applications where we're looking at cells that are much larger than atoms themselves, but still maybe you want to get mechanical information from the cell, these types of miniaturized chip AFMs chip microscopes can be really useful.
Okay, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Michael. We are really going at a high pace through a number of beautiful ideas and also executions of the ideas. So we have 3 more to go. The next presenter, our 8th presenter, is Elizabeth Austin from the Australian Institute of Health Innovation at Macquarie University.
What is unsustainable healthcare, and how might that affect you when you are sick? My name is Elizabeth Austin, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the Australian Institute of Health Innovation at Macquarie University, and I'm breaking the wall of unsustainable healthcare. Healthcare systems exist to provide safe, timely, quality care, but we are seeing a surge in demand for services along with shortages in resources, making it increasingly difficult for our healthcare services to provide the quality of care that we expect. We are seeing clinicians having to work around system structures and bend the rules to provide care within available resources. For example, our hospital emergency departments are operating more and more often at full capacity. Doctors and nurses change the way they work, taking shortcuts, making use of corridor spaces so that their patients receive timely care. Workarounds like these create temporary system capacity, but they are not sustainable. This means that healthcare systems that rely on workarounds like these are unsustainable. I want to break down the wall of unsustainable healthcare. To do this, I designed dynamic, sustainable systems innovations that improve workflow for doctors and nurses and that optimizes the capacity of our systems to adapt. These innovations enable healthcare systems like our emergency departments to cope with increasing and unpredictable demands, such as we've seen during COVID, and enhances the provision of safe, timely, and quality care. I use human factors tools to provide detailed and accurate information that helps us to understand and improve care interactions, such as between clinicians and technology or between clinicians and patients. For example, my research exposed human-technology interaction problems, space constraints, and adaptive work patterns that create extra work or slow down work processes for ED staff, helping to explain why patients are waiting longer to be seen and taking longer to treat. To solve this problem, I create models that clinicians, managers, researchers, and technology developers can use to simulate and test interventions. Multiple problem-solving ideas can be tested and optimized before they're introduced into the real world with real patients. My models support new ways of working that make care safer for patients and less stressful for the doctors and nurses who care for them.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, please welcome Martina to ask the question.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for a very engaging presentation and also for the promising work that you're undertaking. I'm interested in the human factors tools that you've been mentioning, and you've already given us a number of examples there. Can you tell us a bit more about how they operate at the individual level and how they operate at the systems level?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So we use a couple of different human factors tools. We use one called the cognitive work analysis framework. And within that, it has a suite of tools that we use to map out the system in terms of independent of actors. So it's called the work domain analysis, which allows us to map the system's purpose at each level from the higher up aim of for example, why the emergency department exists, all the way through down to what objects exist within the system. And the other tools within the framework allow us to map out the decision-making processes that experts and novices go through when they make decisions in the workspace. So that's one tool that we use. And we also use one called the functional resonance analysis method, or FRAM. And that allows us to map out the processes that people use when they work in the clinical space. So these tools are quite, the data that we use for these tools is based on policy documents and guidelines to start with. So we map out how the work is imagined in these documents, and then we go in and we collect data on how they actually work. So we use observations and interviews and other types of data collection to establish how it's actually done. And then we look at the difference between the two and find out where people are working around their work and why.
Thanks very much. Yes, thanks very much for those insights into the work that you do.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, please welcome our ninth presenter, Nata Franco Soares de Bem from the University of Newcastle.
What do you see here? You might say just a wall, but what if I told you that we can see more, deeper, all the way down to the bonds between the atoms in there? How? Let me introduce you to the world's most powerful camera, the atomic force microscope. This microscope is the most modern tool used to identify, study, and classify samples in the nanometric scale. It is composed of a cantilever with a very sharp tip that moves along a sample and a light sensor that allows it to take images even in 3D. However, the biggest drawback of these high-end microscopes is exactly the light sensor, as it is very difficult to minimize its size. It has been shown that smaller cantilevers and therefore microscopes allow for better resolution, faster and less invasive imaging. My research tackles these problems by completely replacing the light sensor with a system that is fully integrated in the size of a microchip. This microchip contains not only one, but two smart sensors, smaller than a grain of sand, allowing for more trustworthy measurements and more information to be gathered. The benefits in size and improvements are clear, but because it comes as a microchip altogether, it is possible to mass manufacture it, which brings me to the other main advantage of my research: price. If 2020 has taught me anything, is that the wall between the so-called developed and non-developed countries is ever so present. While some countries have enough money to buy vaccines to cover almost 8 times its entire population, Canada, take a hint, others are yet to give the first shot. Reducing the price of state-of-the-art equipment like this is of utmost importance in tearing down the wall of global inequality in terms of access to scientific tools and knowledge. As such, my research does not only push the frontier of technical specs for these microscopes, but also of equitable access to technology. We cannot let this wall fall by itself. Rather, it is our responsibility to break it down one microscope at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Nata. Please let me ask Jason again to ask the question.
Thank you very much, Hans, and thanks, Nata, for your presentation and your enthusiasm. Well done. My question goes to, my understanding is that there's an enormous amount of progress which is being made in different types of microscopy techniques and also technology. And are there any limitations to the work that you're doing in terms of the different techniques and the different technologies that are now available and developing? And how do you see those sort of working in tandem with those directions?
Thank you. My microscopes, they are designed to work on a very new mode of operation called off-resonance stepping. And this mode has only been invented a few years ago, and it has been used to image very, very soft samples, like even living cells or bacteria. My designs have been, my microchips have been designed to work especially for this technique. So I haven't looked at the other modes of operation, which there are a few, because I've been focusing on this one specific method, which is the most modern that we have right now for the microscopes. Also, my microscope sets itself apart from all the other ones because every other microscope only uses one sensor, and they use an external measurement to acquire the second measurement that they can have. But because I use two sensors and they are all integrated, all the measurements that I have are true measurements from the cantilever's displacement due to those interatomic force that I described. So it can actually use the measurements that come from the cantilever itself and the interactions that it has with the sample, instead of relying on anything external to get all the information from the samples, like viscosity or mechanical properties that the sample that we're studying has.
Terrific. Thanks very much for your response.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nata. Thank you, Jason. Now let's welcome the 10th and last presenter of this evening, Olga Lucia Gamboa Arana from the University of Sydney.
Annie, my neighbor, lost her job last year due to the pandemic, and so far she has not been able to find a new position, which means she's under a lot of stress and financial pressure. I see her often trying to find new ways to deal with her stress and increase her well-being. The case of Annie is a very clear case of how our well-being is challenged in our lives. Researchers have the important role and responsibility to unveil the tools or strategies that will help us keep our well-being in healthy levels. This is very important because research has found that well-being directly impacts our health. Despite the goodness of science, there are problems, and one of these problems is that there is a big gap between how we are experiencing our situations in daily lives and how they are being recreated in the lab. Following Annie's case, in which she is very stressed, but the stress can be caused due to work situations or financial issues or social interactions, among others. When the stress experiment is performed in a lab, normally the person is in front of a computer and performs a task that will be stressful. It could be a social stress task or a color task or a math test. Of course, these studies are giving very important information, but by no means we can tell that Annie's case is equivalent to someone performing a task in a lab. So my proposal here is to create and provide a multimodal well-being training centered on emotional intelligence and mindfulness techniques such as meditation, mindful movement, healthy eating, emotion regulation, and nature connectedness. This will be assessed through neuroscience methods such as electroencephalography. The aim here is to assess if this multimodal approach will increase well-being levels in persons going through difficult situations, and second, we will be able to collect data that will allow us to assess the neurobiology of well-being. I hope this is interesting for you, and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you, Olga. Please let me ask Martina again to ask a question.
Thank you, Hans, and thank you very much, Olga, for your presentation. You talk about a multimodal training program, and you talk about it in terms of research, but also in terms of training. Can you explore a little bit more for us what the training aspect is and how you would make it available to clients?
Yeah, the idea here will be to create a program, like for example, the programs that are now used in mindfulness, for example, like 8-week programs or programs for therapy for clinical client patients. They have 8 weeks, 13 weeks, 15 weeks. So the idea here will be just with normal people that is going under a lot of stress or a lot of problems, difficulties. We will design a similar program where we will address the aspects that are important in well-being. That will be self-awareness, connectedness, and spiritual practices. It will be everything included. So it means it is circling around mindfulness. So it will be similar to the programs that already exist, but we will be able to provide it to people that are actually having the problems. And the idea here is that the data we are collecting now for the different problems that we are addressing regarding well-being, could be stress, it could be ability to forget or whatever, are being done in people that actually are not having those problems. So the idea will be to try to collect some measurements to get to know what is actually happening in the brain, to know if it's different to the clinical patient or the normal patient, so the normal person. So that would be the idea. And how we will offer it, actually in Spain, they are already doing this type of research, something similar, not with electroencephalography or stuff like that, but like with mindfulness. And they open it to the citizens, to the audience, to the public around. And we will make
the idea would be to make a call that people that are having this problem have this availability, and then we can help them, and we can also help science to get better data.
Thank you very much for the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Olga. Now, this concludes the 3-minute presentation and the question and answer session. Wasn't it a wonderful series of works? And I really hope that all of you have the opportunity to continue not just your studies, but take that to reality. Now, normally there would be a huge round of applause in the room. The acoustics isn't quite good enough for all to clap. So maybe we vote with the good old sign of Zoom, which is the thumbs up for all of you. And now the jury has the challenge to find the 2 winners, which will not be easy. So the jury only has 20 minutes to make up their mind. So we will be back soon to announce the 2 top winners who will represent New South Wales, ACT and Tasmania at the Falling Walls Lab, which will be held in Canberra at the Shine Dome of the Academy on September 1. Unfortunately, again, it's probably going to be an online event. So please don't forget to cast your vote for the People's Choice. You will have until the jury returns to do so on Facebook or YouTube, where the event is being live streamed. So we will be back soon, but in the meantime, enjoy some of the interesting features and videos we selected for you about falling walls and about the many ideas that people have proposed. Thank you.
Science matters to all of us.
We're living in science. We're a world that's driven by science.
A world without science would be a desolate sort of place.
No technology, no electricity, no travel, no planes, no medicine.
A good scientist is someone who can ask a really good question. Once you've answered it, it will have an impact on all sorts of other fields.
With science, you're trying to uncover something no one else has ever managed to discover. I think the moment of discovery is a really interesting moment. The point where you realise that you're studying something that could be profoundly interesting and you can almost taste the discovery.
It's the biggest buzz you can imagine, the aha moment that, oh my God, we've got it.
We live in a world of extraordinary challenges. The solutions to those challenges are more science and technology, not less.
If the public have a deeper understanding of science, that allows them to make more informed choices about the way they live their lives, the way they interact with the planet, and being healthier, which ultimately impacts their families and their communities.
The future doesn't happen to us. We get to decide. Those decisions will be about how we best use technology and science to solve the very many problems that are facing us.
We have come a really long way in scientific discovery and innovation over the last 100 years, even in the last decade. But there is still so much that we don't know.
The beauty of the universe.
Understanding the basic building blocks of life.
The beauty of how things work. With science, you can solve problems. With science, you can make discoveries that none of us could ever have imagined.
this big, cool competition that looks at research from young scientists all over the world who have the next big thing. I've created a piece of technology that can empower people to retrain their balance in their own homes before they have those falls. This is particularly for people who live in regional and remote areas and might not have access to the medical facilities that we have in big cities.
I work on designing and fabricating implants that we can load with multiple different chemotherapy drugs to actually insert inside the tumour. I'm looking forward to the networking opportunities.
The Australian Academy of Science. Follow our Facebook page.
Can we change the world in 3 minutes? 3 young Australian researchers will try to do just that at the Falling Walls Lab finale in Berlin, an international forum for the next generation of outstanding thinkers and innovators. They will each present a 3-minute pitch alongside 100 other finalists from more than 55 labs across the globe.
It's very exciting, it's an amazing opportunity. I will be able to talk to different people, so potentially there might be a company that's interested in commercializing the platform.
Dr. Elena Schneider-Fuschig has developed a platform that measures drug concentrations in cystic fibrosis patients to evaluate and predict patient outcomes.
So patients currently only have life expectancies of about 40 years, which is not good enough just yet. So we still need to work on giving them longer life expectancies and helping them live better lives.
Kate Seacombe is investigating the gut microbiome's role in personalising cancer treatments to prevent intestinal toxicity, which can have a debilitating effect on a patient's quality of life.
Being able to predict gut toxicity from a range of cancer treatments is going to save money, it's going to save people's embarrassment, save pain, just really be able to increase people's quality of life during cancer treatment.
Rhys Peary has developed a chemical recycling process to take waste glass, which is currently going to landfill, and turn it into everyday products like fertilisers, detergents, and even toothpaste.
One of the things I like to say is we don't have a waste problem, we have a lack of incentive to recycle. So if we can increase the value of the waste products that we're trying to recycle, then it provides that incentive to actually use it in useful products.
From the side effects of medical treatments to a global waste problem, which of these walls will fall next?
The Australian Academy of Science, because questions need answers.
I often say it's science fiction turning into reality. It's not so much skin, it's more of electronics which you can wear on your skin. So you're standing on the beach, you want to track the amount of UV exposure that you're actually having on a day-to-day basis. I think it's a very special moment. You know, you always feel very humbled, and this is even more special because it's recognition at an international level. It's a technology which is kind of similar to, you know, the electrochromic technology which is used in plane windows, but this doesn't change color. You can imagine it being used as gas sensors to sense gases which are odorless and colorless. It's not just dangerous gases, pollution, cigarette smoke, each of it is a gas of a different form. Or as smart optical coatings, so either the form of smart contact lenses or futuristic flat optical devices. The same technology can be used for biometrics. So understanding the body or understanding, things which are present in saliva or sweat or tears, all these are, the possibilities which could result from this.
The Australian Academy of Science. Satisfy your curiosity.
Climate change is one of our biggest challenges, but science exists to overcome challenges. So here are some of the year's top innovations in the battle against global warming. There is some amazing work taking place right around the world, but let's begin in Madagascar.
Malagasy forest is under serious threats due to the fast-growing deforestation, mainly caused by bushfire and charcoal production.
Dr. Pascal Safid has designed a machine that creates biobriquettes, a biofuel substitute made from grass that can replace charcoal and coal.
The idea is to take the grass and press them by using a press machine to get biobriquettes. Indeed, grass is renewable and regenerates faster than trees. The grass powder will be compacted by applying a high pressure with a press machine. Then we get the biobriquettes.
These little grass pellets can be used to boil water and create steam energy, propel turbines for electricity, and even heat homes. Now, we already know we need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, but what about the carbon dioxide that we've already released into the atmosphere?
It's going to be up there, floating around for hundreds of years. In other words, how do we regain control of our planet's thermostat?
One answer to that can be found in our oceans. Australia's Professor Peter McCready is zoning in on how they draw down carbon.
In particular, seagrass meadows, tidal marshes, and mangrove forests, and also seaweeds, they only occupy about 1% of the seafloor, yet they sequester more than half the ocean's carbon.
And they lock that carbon down for thousands of years. So Peter McCready says the evidence is clear. The world should now be protecting so-called blue carbon sites. To Germany now, where Professor Frank Dimroth is trying to get more value from the sun.
Now, what we believe is that solar energy will be the primary energy technology in the future. We all know that we have to go into a conversion from fossil fuels into renewable energies for establishing a more sustainable society.
Creating energy from sunlight isn't a new idea, but standard solar cells can only convert light of a limited wavelength range, while other regions of the sun spectrum are hardly used, if at all.
What we are trying to do is to use several materials which match much better to the different wavelengths in the solar spectrum. We call these tandem solar cells or multi-junction solar cells. And the materials which we are adding to the silicon are, for example, 3,5 compounds. An example would be gallium arsenide, and very new material where a lot of people are performing research today is the so-called perovskites. Both of these material systems have shown that we can very significantly increase conversion efficiency by combining these new materials with the conventional silicon used in today's photovoltaics.
And that could improve the efficiency of solar cells even further, helping the world make the jump to renewables, provided that society can ensure the current generation of lead perovskites does not introduce another kind of environmental hazard. Can you imagine a world without waste? Well, maybe not, but perhaps we can rethink how that waste is made. That was the approach taken by Andrea Ling, who recognised her own part in the problem.
My response was to recognize, as an architect and a designer, all I do is create waste, or what will be waste. And so if that's the case, then I need to design waste as nature does.
You heard right, she designs waste intentionally. That waste incorporates natural biological decay in its fabrication process, using enzymes and microbes that are built into the materials, allowing the biomaterials and bioplastics to self-decompose under the right conditions, thereby reducing our waste output.
My base material system included biocomposites of chitin, cellulose, and pectin, derived from the exoskeletons of shrimp, tree pulp waste, and fruit skins.
And that's the kind of thinking the world needs right now. You can read more about these innovations and many others by heading to the website now on your screen. I suspect they'll give you as much hope as they gave me. I'm Nuala Hafner. See you next time on Global Science.
Remember to hit subscribe for our regular videos.
And while you're here, check out our past episodes.
Plastic recycling and efficient solar storage. They're two of the world's biggest challenges. Thomas Maschmeyer decided to tackle both.
One of the ways I approach my science is to look at a problem that really irks me. It's there, and I'm a scientist, technologist, so can I do something about it?
His solution to plastic waste is known as the catalytic hydrothermal reactor. It uses water at supercritical temperatures to convert end-of-life mixed plastics into recycled oil. Yes, oil. Nature takes millions of years to create oil. Professor Maschmeyer's reactor can do it in less than 30 minutes using materials that are currently clogging landfill and polluting our waterways.
And if we don't do anything different by 2050, we will have more plastic in the ocean than fish, and that's just not acceptable. So it's really about changing the conversation, making the problem of plastic into an opportunity.
The world uses around 100 million barrels of fossil oil every day, so his reactor technology could help power a circular economy. The process has been successfully trialled on the central coast of New South Wales and is now set to be rolled out commercially by Licella Holdings, a company he co-founded 13 years ago.
So the plants pay themselves after 4 years, and they should run for a minimum of 20.
Professor Maschmeyer's work on energy storage is equally game-changing. Research conducted by his team at the University of Sydney has translated into a new form of solar energy battery. And unlike lithium-ion, it doesn't overheat.
Our battery is completely different. It's a zinc-bromine chemistry, which loves the heat. We perform best at 45 degrees, where everything else dies. And we love going to zero state of charge.
That makes it perfect for harsh mining or agricultural settings or anywhere off the grid.
The appetite for solar battery solutions in those areas is huge, and the world's really waiting for that to replace the dirty and expensive diesel gensets in terms of running them over a 10-year period, to replace them with a no liquid fuel kind of situation, just solar panels and batteries. Huge appetite.
Professor Maschmeyer hopes his technology will assist the switch to a battery-powered world.
I love technology translation, and the latter half of my career has been dedicated to that, to really attack some of the big, challenging physical problems of our planet.
And that work has seen Professor Maschmeyer awarded the David Craig Medal, which recognises outstanding contributions to chemistry.
We have seen what we thought was unseeable. This image forges a clear link now between supermassive black holes and the engines of bright galaxies. We now know clearly that black holes drive large-scale structure in the universe from their home in these galaxies. And we now have an entirely new way of studying general relativity in black holes that we never had before. And as with all great discoveries, this is just the beginning.
The Australian Academy of Science.
Every year brings new breakthroughs in science. Imagine what can happen in a decade. Here are 5 standout stories from the past 10 years. The announcement was stunning.
We have seen what we thought was unseeable.
An image of a black hole. Given it's located about 55 million light years away in the galaxy M87, seeing it was anything but simple. It was captured with the Event Horizon Telescope, an array of 8 radio telescopes around the world, operating as if they were one. The image is the result of years of international collaboration by more than 200 researchers. It was a decade that shed new light on human evolution. We now know that 9 human species were alive around 300,000 years ago. They include Homo naledi, which captured the world's imagination in 2015, thanks to this artist's reconstruction based on skeletons found in South Africa 2 years earlier. Its primitive features were surprising, given our first human ancestors appeared almost 6 million years ago. Australian-led research also suggests that the ancestral homeland of modern humans is the southern African countries of Botswana, Namibia and Zimbabwe. Picture cosmic events so violent that they cause ripples in the fabric of space-time. Albert Einstein predicted the existence of gravitational waves in 1916, but it wasn't until 2015 that they were physically detected. The LIGO Observatory in the United States sensed the collision of 2 black holes nearly 1.3 billion light years away.
When this signal came in, we were quite astonished.
The breakthrough was made possible by the efforts of scientists around the world, including Academy Fellow Professor David McClelland. His Australian team developed some of LIGO's crucial elements. Since 2015, there have been 11 confirmed detections of gravitational waves, including the collision of 2 neutron stars in 2017.
It took us 100 years to design and develop an instrument that would be capable of detecting any gravitational wave.
These observations are heralding a staggering new chapter in astrophysics. CRISPR technology is a powerful new tool to edit the DNA in cells, meaning it has the potential to cure genetic diseases. But the technique has much wider applications. For example, it's already being used to create crops that can better withstand droughts and pests. But CRISPR also raises serious ethical questions. A Chinese scientist was widely condemned in 2018 for altering the genetic code of 2 human babies.
I've called for a global conversation about the technology that I co-invented so that we can consider all of the ethical and societal implications.
The last decade was the hottest ever recorded. Extreme weather events became more common, while evidence mounted that ecosystems are changing. Coral cover for the northern Great Barrier Reef reached record lows.
The year 2019
Recording in
concludes
progress.
a decade of exceptional global heat, retreating ice and record sea levels driven by greenhouse gases from human activities.
Australia's greenhouse gas emissions are at a 7-year high. And while some countries have taken significant steps to slash their emissions, global action has never been more urgent.
We need to recognise that climate change also
Welcome back to our audience, to the presenters, and to the jury. The tension is building. But before we go to announce the winners, let me quickly recap our 10 presenters. We have Breaking the Wall of Self-Driving Car, Morteza Saberi, University of Technology, Sydney. Breaking the Wall of Searching for a Silent Killer, Nafiseh Mirabdolhosseini from Western Sydney University. Breaking the Wall of Alien Fish Invasion by Trojan War, Lokman, Norazmi, Institute of Marine and Arctic Studies, University of Tasmania. Breaking the Wall of Urban Heat in Western Sydney, Mahmuda Sharmin from Western Sydney University. Breaking the Wall of 100% Transition to Renewable Energies, Mohammadreza, Sedighi from Southern Cross University. Breaking the Wall of Stem Cell Therapies for Osteoarthritis, Jiao Li, University of Technology, Sydney. Breaking the Wall of Single-Chip Microscopy, Michael Ruppert from the University of Newcastle. Breaking the Wall of Unsustainable Healthcare, Elizabeth Austin, Australian Institute of Health Innovation, Macquarie University. Breaking the Wall of Microscopy, Nata Franco Soares de Bem, University of Newcastle. And Breaking the Wall of Wellbeing Research, Olga Lucia Gamboa Arana, University of Sydney. Now, please welcome Jury Chair and New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, Professor Hugh Durand-White.
I'll say firstly, thank you so much everyone for the presentations. We were really, really impressed, not just with the technology, but the way you presented. I think even if the technology doesn't work, you've got jobs as salespeople, has to be said. You're very, very good at that. And I'd say we were also very impressed at the range of technologies and the diversity of the kinds of things that people are thinking about in general. So it's really, really good to see all that. But in the end, I'm afraid we have to come to a decision about second and first place. And we have managed to do that as a jury. In second place is, wait for it, I just need my thing. In second place is Alien Fish Invasion via Trojan War by Lokman Norazmi of the University of Tasmania. There we go, good. We all thought it was really, really intriguing, really interesting, and the fact that you had really thought through a lot of different things. Really good. I really enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very much.
But in first place is Breaking Down the Walls of Stem Cell Therapies for Osteoarthritis by Jiao Li from the University of Technology, Sydney.
Thank you so much. I was not expecting that at all, but thank you.
So congratulations. It was really, really good to see both of them.
Would you like to add a few words, Jiao?
I was totally not expecting this result because during the break session, I was actually chatting silently to Elizabeth Austin about how I was totally feeling imposter syndrome because everyone's was so good, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to win this. But I don't know what to say at the moment, but thank you so much. And I'm really glad that that you found this work really impactful and meaningful, and I'll do my best to carry it forward. Thank you.
Right. And then finally, I would like to also announce the People's Choice Award. And the People's Choice Award, fortunately, is the Alien Fish Invasion via Trojan War by Lokman Norazmi from the University of Tasmania. So congratulations. The people thought yours was the best. And again, like I said, fantastic piece of really interesting work. Would you like to say a few words?
I would just like to thank everyone. I would like to thank the jury. And also I'd just like to thank my teammates for believing in me, and also to my family and friends. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for taking part in this. Back over to you, Hans.
Thank you, Hugh. And by the way, if you have some background noise, it actually started to rain, which is not unusual. And I'm in a room with a tin roof, but I hope you can still hear me. So thank you, Hugh. Thank you, jury. And I would like to thank the jury members all individually, Professor Hugh Durand-White, Mr. Jason Collins, Professor Martina Möllering, Dr. Veena Sharavala, Mr. Nishant Shantiala, and Katerina McGrath. Thank you for the task of looking at this, which wasn't simple. I also would like to thank the organizers, both locally and globally, who make Falling Walls possible. You see the logos here. We have a very strong group of people who are supporting us, both here in Australia and from Germany. So thank you for taking part in Falling Walls Labs. We are looking forward to seeing the winners in Canberra for the national finale. And we would encourage you to take part in viewing the next event. So I hope you will all be tuning in September. And for now, that concludes Falling Walls Lab New South Wales 2021. I'm Professor Hans Bachor. Good evening.